never believe what one of our Faroese friends dropped off at the boat this morning. One of our Faroese friends works at a fish processing plant, and this morning he dropped this off. First thing we have, these, oh jeez. I can't believe this. These are salmon fillets. These are gigantic, and you couldn't possibly have fresher salmon. These just came from the fish farm. In addition to those fillets, we've got a whole nother one, a whole complete salmon. These are from one of the local salmon farms, and there's no question that they're as fresh as you can possibly get. I really wish we could freeze this in our freezer, but unfortunately we just don't have any room. We already did all of our provisioning, and our freezer is completely full, mostly with bags of frozen vegetables and then some other meats, and there's just no more room in there. So what I'm gonna do is can it. Over this past winter in Scotland, Mo and I learned how to pressure can meat. By the end of the winter, we had canned 175 of these jars with assorted meats: chicken, beef, pork, and ground beef. Mo and I have found that half of one jar is the perfect amount for making dinner for two. So we now have enough canned meat aboard Paragon to make 350 dinners for me and Mo. We think canning our own meats is fantastic. These cans don't require refrigeration, and they have a pretty indefinite shelf life. The texture of the canned meat is different than it was before you canned it, but it's perfectly acceptable for making a whole bunch of really fantastic recipes. This is incredibly economical because meats in the UK are pretty affordable. We were able to wait for meats to go on sale at the grocery store and then just go in and buy a whole bunch in bulk and bring it back to the boat and can it all. And especially because we're going to places where we know meat is either going to be unavailable or is going to be a lot more expensive, especially I think in Norway. I remember when we were in Iceland and we were kind of shocked at how expensive things were, and then we told some of our Icelandic friends that we were thinking of going to Norway someday, and they were like, ooh, Norway, that's really expensive. So I don't think we're going to be buying fresh meats in the grocery stores in Norway. Instead, we'll bring our own in these cans. Kind of funny thing is, after we finish sailing in Svalbard, our good friend Ben Stuckey is going to come up and sail with us for the next 2 months from Svalbard down the coast of Norway and then back to the UK. He said, oh, this looks great, you know, I'd love to do it and I'd love to sail the coast of Norway. There's just this one thing. I'm a vegetarian. Is that going to be okay? I just canned all these jars of meat. Of course. Ben's such a great guy, and it's going to be so great to have him aboard. If we have to become vegetarians in order to have Ben sail with us, it'll be well worth it. Just kind of funny. Alright, so let's can the salmon. I'm going to show you the process that we go through to can meats or fish. This is our pressure canner. It's made by a company called Presto. I'm just going to go through a few of the parts. This is the pressure gauge. The pressure gauge measures pounds per square inch. You can adjust the pressure by raising the flame on the stove up or down. This is the vent pipe. Pressure won't build up in the canner as long as this vent pipe is open. To close it, you put this pressure regulator on top of the vent pipe. It allows pressure to escape, but only above 15 pounds per square inch. It helps maintain a required amount of pressure for canning, as we'll see in a moment. This is called the air vent cover lock. As pressure builds up in the canner, this will eventually pop up, and it serves as like a visual indication that there's pressure in the canner. Right here we have a safety device called an overpressure plug. If pressure is building up in the canner and if it exceeds what the canner is designed for, then this plug will blow. It'll pop off and then pressure will be released. Inside the lid, there's this rubber ring. It's called the sealing ring. You align these arrows when you place the cover on top, and then you turn it like this, and then it locks and seals. Finally, we have this, which is called the canning rack. Put this in the canner and you put the jars on top of it. If you didn't have this in there, then the jars might crack from bouncing up and down on the bottom. By having the jars on top of this, they won't crack. Another thing I did over the winter was I installed this freshwater hand sprayer in the galley. I find that it really helps with doing dishes. The level marker is right there. So I'm just going to fill the water up to that point. Okay, there we go. Next we're going to wash the jars with super hot water and soap. It's really important that you get the jars as clean as possible. I'm going to put some soap on the sponge. So some super hot water, just a little scrub. This is actually the second time around canning with these jars. I used them previously to can other meats that we got from Scotland, and now I'm going to use them the second time. I can hold the jar upside down like this and just spray the super hot water up into it, and that rinses it out and gets it super clean. That's one. Hi, kitty. Meow. What you doing? Meow. Did you have a good day? Now that we've got the jars clean, it's time to put the salmon in the jars. Look at the size of that thing. It's bigger than my head. So there's one jar full of fresh salmon. You don't add water or salt or broth or anything, just the fish. Jar number 2. All kinds of interesting stuff going on here, huh? Eight jars of salmon. The next very important step is to clean the rims of the jars with vinegar and a paper towel. It's really important that you not have anything on the rim because that will prevent the jars from sealing during the canning process. I'll put some vinegar on it and then wipe the rim of anything that's on there. Close visual inspection. So next we're going to wash these lids that go on the jars. You'll notice on the underside of the lid there's a gasket right here. You put the lid on the jar, put the jar in the pressure canner, raise the heat up, which raises the pressure up, and the heat and the pressure cook the contents of the can as well as destroy any bacteria that could cause the contents to spoil. Then you turn the flame off, you take the jar out of the canner, you set it down and let it cool, and as it cools there's this contraction that happens inside the jar that's so strong that it takes the lid of the jar and it pops it down and creates this enormous amount of suction. Later, when the jar is fully cooled, it's very difficult to pry that lid off of the jar because there's just so much suction there. You can actually hold the jar from the lid, which is only held on by suction. If that seal failed in any way, then that pressure would be released, and when you grab the jar to eat it, you would notice that the lid had popped back up, and then you would know that the contents weren't good to eat. So that's it. So let's just wash these and then we'll put them on the jars and we'll put them in the canner. Some people recommend that you put the lid in a bowl of hot water to make the gasket there sort of more pliable. But the latest guidance from the company that makes these lids is that that's totally unnecessary. Still, there's a lot out on the internet that says that you must do that. I do it anyway. There you go. Many, many nights over the winter in Stornoway, I was right here canning chicken. I think we have at least 50 cans of chicken. Sometimes I say can and sometimes I say jar. I mean, they are glass jars, but this process is called canning, so it's easy to slip up and call them cans, even though they're jars. Great to have a whole bunch of jars for when you find meats that go on sale, so you can buy a lot in bulk and then bring it home and can it all. It's also pretty cool when somebody comes over with hundreds of dollars worth of salmon and says, "Here you go." There's so much fishing industry here in Faroe. Just about everybody either works in the fishing industry or has a relative that works in the fishing industry. So while fish is very expensive here in Faroe in the grocery stores, when people go out on their fishing boats, they usually, I believe, bring a lot of that fish home and have it for their family, but also they give it to their extended family and their friends. Everybody's running around giving everybody else fish around here. It's pretty amazing. Now we'll put these lids on the jars. We're going to put these things on the jars. They screw on like this, and they hold the lid down on the jar. It's really important that you don't over tighten these, because when the pressure comes up in the canner, there's this expansion that happens, and that expansion needs a way to get past the gasket, and if you tighten down on the gasket too much, that doesn't happen. Put these on only finger tight. So there we go. Now we'll put the jars in the canner. You have to make sure that this vent is not obstructed, and you can do that by holding the lid up to a light on the other side and looking through it, and if you see the light on the other side, then you know it's not obstructed. I've done that. There's a little arrow here that you match up with the arrow here, like that, and then you turn like this. Now it's sealed. And now we turn on the stove. Pretty soon the water in there will boil and start to release steam, and the steam will come out of this vent pipe. Once the steam comes out of the vent pipe, you start a timer for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes has passed, you put the pressure regulator on the vent pipe, which restricts the escape of steam and builds pressure inside the canner. As the pressure increases, you'll see the dial go up here on this gauge. Once it gets to 11 pounds, and you start a second timer for 75 minutes, which is how long it takes to kill all of the bacteria that's in the jar and cook the contents of the jar. If it goes too high, then you bring the heat down. You probably bring the heat down a little bit once it reaches 11, but if it ever falls below 11, then you have to start the countdown process again from the start. It's okay for the pressure to go higher than 11, but it can't go lower than 11. For 75 minutes. Okay, now you can see that steam is coming out of the vent pipe. We're going to let that go for 10 minutes and then put the pressure regulator over it. Okay, the steam has been coming up for 10 minutes now, so we'll put the regulator on now. And then in the next few minutes, the dial will go up and we'll watch it and note when it gets to 11, and that's when we'll start our 75-minute timer. And we might turn the heat down so it doesn't go much higher than 11. Just got to make sure it doesn't fall below 11. Tonight we're going to make salmon chowder using that salmon that I canned in the Faroe Islands over 3 months ago. Since I canned that salmon, we sailed over 1,200 nautical miles to Svalbard, spent the summer cruising there, and then sailed down to northern Norway, where we're now spending a few days in the beautiful Lofoten Islands. This salmon chowder recipe is one of my favorites. I love this chowder. You can definitely make it with store-bought canned salmon, but honestly, it is just 10 times better using the salmon that I canned myself that was caught just earlier that day. So, let's just jump into it. These are all of the ingredients that are going to go into the salmon chowder. We've got cheddar cheese, butter, milk, canned corn, salt, pepper, dill, flour, potatoes, an onion, celery, carrots, garlic cloves, chicken bouillon cubes, and a green bell pepper. And that's everything that's going to go into the salmon chowder. Oh, and the salmon, canned salmon, don't forget that. Most important ingredient. We're going to start with dicing the onions. Next, I'm going to mince the garlic. I don't think you can go wrong adding too much garlic. I don't think there's any such thing. Next, I'm going to chop the celery. Chop up the green bell pepper. I'm going to take 2 tablespoons of butter, maybe a little more. In Norway, butter is called smør. It really helps to have Google Translate when you're in the grocery store trying to figure out what stuff is. We're going to put that in the pot and melt it, and then add the onions, celery, green bell pepper, and after those vegetables have softened a bit, then we're going to add the garlic. Butter is a magic ingredient. Now that that butter is melted, I'm going to add the green bell pepper and the celery, onion, doesn't hurt to add more butter. While this is cooking, I'm going to boil some water in the kettle to mix with the chicken bouillon cubes to make the stock. And I'm going to chop the potatoes. Actually, that's probably a little too much potato, but I'm sure it'll be fine. 3 cups of hot water and the bouillon. Now that the onion, green bell pepper, and celery is softened, we'll add the garlic. We'll let that cook down for about a minute. 2 tablespoons of flour. Stir that all up with the flour. Now we'll add the carrots and potatoes. The broth. A teaspoon of dill. Pepper. Salt. So this has been boiling for, I don't know, about 10 minutes, maybe a little more. And the potatoes and the carrots are now tender. So we're ready to go on to the next step. 2 cups of milk, 1 can of corn, and the all-important canned salmon, which we canned in June of 2018, just over 3 months ago. And as I explained in the video when I canned it, after the salmon or the contents have been cooked in high pressure for the required amount of time, then you take it out of the pressure canner, and as it cools, it contracts. And that makes this lid get sucked down onto the jar. There's so much suction there that I can't take this lid off with my bare hands. It's just like, even if I try really hard, I can't take it off. So what I need to do is use a can opener. You just put that under the lid and you open it up, and listen to this. You'll hear the escape of air, the escape of the pressure. When you hear that sound, you know that there hasn't been a loss of pressure and that the contents are suitable for eating. I'm just going to have some straight out of the jar. That tastes fantastic. Okay, and it goes. Okay, so we'll let this come up to a higher temperature and then just let it simmer for a little while, not too long. It's pretty much ready to go. We'll put the soup into bowls and then put shredded cheese on top, and there you go. I'll probably serve it with some toasted bread.
Dutch girl?
So this is salmon that I got in the Faroe Islands, and I canned it myself like over 3 months ago. I got like, how many cans? I think
14 or something?
14 cans of salmon.
There's one big fish?
Like 2, I think.
One
Yeah,
big fish
actually.
and then a couple of fillets.
Yeah, yeah.
But what are they? They're 5-6 kilo? Or?
What do you think, Will?
Yeah, at least.
And some of these caught here, it can be 30 kilo.
Count me in. Sounds
That's
great.
A lot of cans.
Yeah, it's a lot of cans.
1 or 2.